Let's take this show on the road. Same-ish, different day. I'll be bored out my mind. Hometown, love my place.
Hey friends, let's dye some yarn. Today we are going to be dyeing on some DK weight superwash merino. I've got 4 skeins here. And the first thing, first thing you need to do is to soak it in water, because you want the yarn to be wet, otherwise the dye will not stick to the yarn at all. So I'm going to start off by adding about half a tablespoon of citric acid. Citric acid is what's going to make sure the dye sticks to the yarn. The citric acid in combination with the dye and heat. I'm adding in water. This is a 2-liter measuring cup. I have a very big plastic tub, so I'm going to be adding in 6 liters of water. And that one, you can use a smaller tub if you like. The only thing that matters is that the yarn is completely soaked. So just pick a plastic tub that is big enough for that. Okay. And some more water. Before adding in the skeins, we are going to put zip ties on them, because it helps in avoiding tangling while you're dyeing. They are tied off in different places also, but the zip tie is a good help as well. It's also easier to catch the individual skein when you are picking them up to rinse or just in the dye tub. There we go. That's 2. And we got 1 more. There we are. And the last one. There we go. I'm just grabbing the skeins by the zip ties. And we're going to add them in the soaking tub. I'm just pressing down to make sure everything gets wet, helping it along the way. There we go. And we're going to let it soak for at least half an hour, and then we will be ready to dye. The yarn has been soaking for quite a while, and we are ready to start dyeing. First thing we're going to do is to add some more citric acid to the pan that we're using. I'm going to add a tablespoon. Put that in. We need the citric acid for the dye to adhere to stick to the yarn. It's a combination of citric acid, the dye, and heat. I'm also adding in 3 liters of water. And we will be adding the yarn that's been soaking for quite a while now. I'm just going to squeeze out some excess water, mostly to not drip everywhere. I'm just placing them lengthwise in the pan. Next skein. squeezing out some water. And lining it up next to the first skein. There we go. Now we're ready to start adding dye. Today we are going to be dyeing from an inspirational photo. And I found this one. Let's see if I can show you. There we go. It's a sunset with a lot of yellows and some orange and reds, which is going to be the starting point for our dye today. So we will be using yellow. I'm using Jacquard acid dyes, sun yellow, and I'm using burnt orange, and also fire red. I've got an old yogurt tub empty with water in it to put my spoons. Got some teaspoons to grab the dye. Gloves we'll be using later on. And very important, the face mask to protect your airways. Always wear a mask when you're working with these powders. It's very, very fine powder and you do not want to accidentally breathe it in and get it in your lungs. So I'm going to start by putting my mask on, and then we are going to add some color. So to do this, we do have our inspirational photo, but we cannot make it yellow just in the center of these skeins. There are 4 skeins in the pan. And if we only dye yellow in the center, only the 2 center skeins will get that color. So we're going to spread it out all through all 4 skeins. So I'm going to start with the yellow. And I'm just going to sprinkle dye. I'm going to start somewhere around here. In a band across. I'm also going to start the stove. I'm using both of these plates because you need to heat the entire pan. If it doesn't heat everything, the dye is not going to stick. So let's start there. And then we have a little bit of yellowish further down as well. We get a little less here. So. We're going to start building our sunset. Again, there's a starting point. We're doing a bit of yellow here, and we're doing this yellow part up here. I'm going to grab the big spoon and push the dye down into the yarn. So I want it to go all the way through the other side. We don't want white patches on the underside of the yarn. Like so. Next, we are going to get some orange in here. Let's see if you can see that. We got some orange in this area. So we're going to add that as well. I'm going to place that in between the yellows. We can always add more later. And we're going to go for some orange down here as well. And I'm not looking for straight lines here. It's not possible anyway, and that's not really what a sunset looks like either. So we'll start with that. I'm going to push that down to the pan, into the yarn. And down here as well. There we go. And we're going to go in with some red. And I'm splurging on the red up top. And some red at the bottom. So we're going to push that in. Be thorough with the yarn on each end because it's folded over. That means there's a thicker layer of yarn there. So you have to take extra care to make sure you get dye in everywhere. Now I'm leaving a little bit of white in between here because the red dye is so powerful. It's going to reach down anyway. And I want it to be a darker red up top, and I don't want to add too much more at this point. And I'm squeezing in the dye to make sure we get it even everywhere. There we go. Now we're going to let the pan heat up. And I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit. Because we do not want it to boil, but we want it to be hot everywhere. So I'll be turning the pan different ways to make sure it gets heated everywhere. I'm going to start working on blending the colors in this end. Just gently. I want to push the orange color down a bit into the red and mix the two. I'm poking the red again to make sure we get dye everywhere. You can see the yarn is wider underneath. We need to get yarn underneath as well. And I'm going to keep moving the pan around to get it heated everywhere. Pan is starting to heat up now, so I'm putting on a glove and I'm using my fingers to check if it's starting to get warm everywhere. I don't recommend you do this by your own method. This is how I do it. Get some more heat down in this corner. that corner. While that is heating up, we're going to continue blending our colors and making sure we have dye all the way through to the back side. As you can see, it's a little lighter here. The yellow seems to have penetrated fairly well. There are some lighter spots in here. And over here as well. So we're going to grab some of the orange dye. We're going to add a little more in here. And we're going to keep working on getting it pushed into the yarn all the way through. We're getting a more blended edge now. We're going over the rest of the yarn as well to make sure we get dye all the way through. You can see here it's lighter underneath. We got some excess red here, so we're going to add that. Move it around a little bit. Here as well. Add some here too. We're going to blend this edge as well now. As you can see, the yarn is very light here. So I'm grabbing dye from other spots in the pan and adding instead of using more powder. I also want this edge to fade a bit. So I'm sort of reusing excess dye in the pan right now. And still heating up the yarn. Keep in mind the yarn is not supposed to boil, you just want it to be hot. Properly hot. It's the heat in combination with the citric acid and the dye that makes the color set. A lot of lights here. Some reds, so we're gonna go in with a little bit of orange in between there as well. So this, we do want a bit of an orangey edge here between the colors. Now we're going to tap that color in as well. Let's compare to our photo. Here we go. I'm going to make another check to make sure everything is heated properly. As you can see, it's boiling in some areas, which it does not need to do. I'm just poking the yarn in my hands. A little more heat on this edge. This side is hard enough, so I'm just going to turn off the thing up there. We're just going to add in some, get some more heat here. A little bit over here as well. Twisting the pan. Make sure I reach all the spots. Oops. Sorry, I did not mean to kick you. Just redistributing some of the boiling water into this edge. Water is already hot here now, so we're just speeding up the process a little bit. Light patch there, it's okay. Teeny tiny touch of red in there. There we go. All the water is hot now. The yarn is heated properly. And we are going to remove the pan from the heat and let it cool down completely before rinsing. This is very important. You will shock the yarn if you rinse it before it has cooled down completely. So make sure you do that first. And I'm going to set this pan aside and I'll be back when it's time to rinse. The yarn has completely cooled off and it is time to rinse it. So I'm using a plastic container that just put in my sink. You can rinse directly in the sink if you like, or if you have another bowl that is of your choice. And I'm going to use soak in the water while rinsing. This is not something you have to do. It's my preferred method. You can use dish soap, you can use conditioner, shampoo, whatever. Just make sure that you rinse out all the suds if you're using that. With this one, you don't really need to rinse at all. You can use it just once. I always rinse twice though, just to be on the safe side. So I'm gonna add some water in here. I'm going to fill it about half full because I want the yarn to have a little bit of space to move around in the container. So a little bit more. That's good. Okay, I'm just grabbing the zip tie and I'm squeezing out some water. I don't want to make a mess on my counter. There we go. Second one. Squeezing out the water. And I'm placing them next to each other in the rinsing bowl as well, to try to avoid tangling. There's a speck of red dye from the zip tie, I believe. transfer to my hand. And in it goes. And the last one. There we go. There are some specks of red dye. I've obviously spilled some on in the pan and on this side as well. But the water itself is mostly clear, aside from those remaining specks of dye. Okay, so I'm just pushing the yarn down. I'm not agitating it too much to avoid tangling. You don't need to work it too much. I'm going to grab a zip tie. I'm just going to dunk it. And make sure you rinse the zip ties as well, because there may be dye in those. I'm squeezing out the water. I'm not wringing the yarn or using any type of violence. I'm just squeezing it. I can see there is some dye left, which is not surprising because this is a very powerful amount of dye. We use a lot of red, a lot of orange and yellow. It will rinse out. I apologize, the camera cut me off early while rinsing the second skein. I've rinsed all four now once, and we are going to add in more water and go back and do another rinse. There's a lot of dye that hasn't exhausted completely for this one, so we're going to give it another rinse before hanging it to dry. This often happens with the stronger, deeper dyes, especially if you use a larger amount of it. It doesn't exhaust completely, which is absolutely fine. There we go. Now we're just going to add the skeins back into the rinsing bowl. And there we go. Pushing it down. Just moving it gently without disturbing it too much. I don't want to distress it and make it tangle. There we go. Dunk it a couple of times and squeeze out the water. And the first one. Now we'll squeeze out water again. No twisting or rough methods, just squeezing. You can see there's quite a lot of color in the water, which is absolutely fine. We also have a small patch here that hasn't caught dye. That's okay. It's a variegated color, so I don't mind that. Since there is some leftover dye still in the yarn, I'll just make sure to wash the items that I make separately for the first couple of times afterwards, and it will disappear. There we go. You can also keep rinsing, but it might take a while. So I prefer to just get it in the wash. So here's our finished result. I'm going to hang this to dry. I just hang it on a regular clothing rack and it will be dry in a couple of days. And we'll see what the finished result looks like. I'm really loving how this yarn came out. It is such a powerful color with the red and the orange and the yellow. It's literally like a fire. So our sunset is looking very, very good, I think. If you try to dye this color yourself, please tag me on social media. I would love to see what you make. And also if you knit something with it. What are you making? Tag me. I'd love to know.